Very few people know that the electrolyte status of someone with sleep apnea is super duper important because sleep apnea is not like a usual person where you can just go get some electrolytes off the shelf or from Amazon and think you're hunky dory. No, being able to really know what's going on in sleep apnea, the unique damage going on, because that will then determine how your body is using these different electrolytes. So you won't have the same needs as someone else. And in fact, you may need some Brando. If you can name that movie, do let me know. I'll give you 5 YouTube points. So that's why in this episode, we're going to cover which electrolytes are the most important based on the physiology of sleep apnea, and being able to identify what those are for you can be a huge game changer in being able to have more daytime energy and better breathing at night. And of course, how to use each one or what's recommended based on the literature. And of course, just an easy shortcut. Have everything together there for you, make it super easy. And speaking of making something as easy as pie, which whoever made that saying has never clearly made pie. It's rather difficult if you've ever made a crust and had to take a fork around the edge. Now, if you want something as simple as pie, this episode will help. And to make things even simpler, to help you focus on the most important things, that's what we have for our program. You can check that out, ochnow.com/program, or see the link in the profile or description on that here. So, number one, we're going to start with the problem so you can kind of figure it out with me in real time here. So there's one that's your muscle relaxer. And no, it's not magnesium. This one's not magnesium. All right. So let's just get that out of the way. And it has to do with being constantly triggered into this fight or flight response, especially at night, because every single time you stop breathing or struggle to breathe, it's going to trigger your fight or flight. And that fight or flight will be triggered in the muscles, but also in the nervous system in particular here. So here's a sketch from a journal article. And back in the day, I think people actually drew these by hand. This is pretty impressive here. When you have sleep apnea, one of the first thing that goes haywire is your sympathetic nervous system. That is the fight or flight response here. And when that happens, it has a whole cascade of everywhere throughout your body. I know there's a ton of arrows here. This looks like a map of Boston or something like this with all the different roads and curve and no really clear thought out city description. Well, anyway, besides insulting that entire town, we want to pay attention to aldosterone because aldosterone will then act on your kidneys. So, making it super simple, I'm sorry for science, blah, blah, blah. But sympathetic nervous system affects the kidneys, and anything that impacts your kidneys will determine your electrolyte status because it determines what goes where. Aldosterone in particular. So, aldosterone will act inside your kidneys. Now we're inside the kidneys here. On the right, think of it like this is your blood. This is all the stuff going through your veins. On the left is your urine, what's about to go into the toilet. So on the right, blood. On the left, urine. Great, got it, cool. Now, aldosterone will take potassium from your blood and transfer it to your urine. So that's why in the research, when they look at people with obstructive sleep apnea, they have lower levels of potassium and other issues around potassium inside of cells here. And that's why when they supplement people with obstructive sleep apnea, their AHI will go down. All right. So here was the average AHI of someone went down about 5 points just by supplementing potassium here. So it's a small change in just having potassium for a pretty decently sized. Obviously, didn't cure it overnight. That'd be great, right? But just brings it down a notch because it's all about adding many things together for your unique plan. And of course, educational purposes. Peter here to remind you that this is for all educational purposes. So in that study, they did use potassium supplements. Now, that is something, especially if you're someone who's on the older side or have any cardiac issues at all, you must talk to your doctor about what's appropriate for supplementing potassium, non-negotiable. Now, dietary wise, probably the easiest ways to get a little bit that won't cause like a big issue downstream is to use a salt that's going to be higher in potassium. So this is one example. Morton salt, it's called like light salt. It's richer in potassium. There's other brands as well. That's just a general idea. And the simplest swap is to, instead of just using regular salt on your food, you can use this salt here. So that's probably the easiest way to increase potassium. And of course, potassium high foods here are also a good idea, except for pomegranate seeds, because you will lose a lot of potassium stressing yourself out trying to extract those sons of guns from the pomegranate. So, consider yourself warned there. And before someone asked in the comments, how much potassium did they supplement? It was about 100, 200 milligrams of potassium citrate, if you were to consider a supplement there. But again, because potassium can directly interact with how your heart beats and your blood pressure, talk to the people you already talked to about your heart rate and blood pressure. Now, I know I said this muscle relaxer wasn't magnesium, but little did you know there's muscle relaxer part two, which has to do with magnesium. Gotcha. And this has to do with very similar concept of where you have this fight or flight, but now more localized to the muscles, especially your respiratory muscles. Because when you stop breathing at night, your body goes into this overdrive to trigger that gasp. Okay, so it's going to cause those muscles to contract a lot more. But then whenever a muscle contracts, it must also relax so it can contract again. There is one electrolyte that is very, very important for muscle relaxation, and I'm going to do a super zoom on it here. Whoa, okay, that I guess I can't zoom in any further, but it is magnesium. You need ample amounts of magnesium inside of your cells to help relax your muscles. And you already intuitively knew that because oftentimes people will take magnesium either like topically or orally to help with muscle relaxation. Same thing here. And in fact, when people have sleep apnea, their serum magnesium levels are low. If you correct their breathing, magnesium corrects. But of course, we want to make sure that magnesium is good before we like go through all the correction of the breathing because it'll make things function a lot better because magnesium is best friends with ATP. That's your cellular energy. If you're low on magnesium, your body cannot use ATP as it should be able to. Thus, energy produced by your cells gonna be low. I'll just start making those noises instead of providing definitive statements. I think that'll be better here. That's why having some sort of magnesium is going to be electrolyte number 2 for us here. I don't have a particular brand. I mean, I like a particular type, glycinate. Without knowing a whole lot about someone, I think glycinate is a good one to start with because different magnesiums absorb differently, go to different body parts. But I think glycinate is a good overall coverage, 200, 400 milligrams. Um, Magnesium oxide stinks, I guess is what I wanna say there. Now, again, I'm gonna tell you how to mix them all together here in a moment, right, to keep things nice and simple, because no one likes to just float around in information overload because you get a bunch of tips and you're like, "Oh my god, how do I do all this stuff?" So always wanna work to chunk things down for you. So again, we'll talk about that, nightly concoction at the very end. Now, if you're someone who's trying to, like, piece together all different things and it's leaving you confused, frustrated, brain fog, and trying to do things, a lot of times you get caught up into this inaction mode, gonna make things worse, stall out, and, like, a week goes by, 2 weeks, you're learning stuff, but not always able to get the actual benefit of it. Gets really frustrating and just makes your days like grind to a halt and just like, oh my God, how am I going to fix this? So to make things easier for people who are interested, that is why we have our program here of where we just give you really I call it like the 80/20. We give you the 20% of the things that's going to give you 80% of the results. We're going to have a custom breathing plan for you that is just like step by step, super easy to follow. You even get breathing tracks to go through it, live Q&A calls where you get direct access to me. So those little details that make all the difference, get those handled by me in that way. And of course, step-by-step holistic health modules. So instead of trying to piece together all the trendy things that I put out on the internet to try to get, views and clicks, it's just right to it. So that is what you can get there. ochnow.com/program, or the link is in the description below. Now, the third one, it's kind of tricky. All right. It's not as clear as potassium and magnesium low. So have more potassium, magnesium. This has to do with hydration. So with hydration, a lot of times people just think about water, but in reality, our cells are just not these bags where we put fluid into and that's the end of it. Water will follow electrolytes. That's why a lot of this has to do with hydration overall, because if you have a low electrolyte status, then guess what? You're going to be poorly hydrated. The potassium magnesium will help with hydration, but there is one electrolyte that rules them all. That's the most important for hydration. And for sodium, that's what this one is, it gets a little tricky because at night, if you have too much fluid in your tissues, it will, because if you're laying down, it will, instead of just being like lower in your body all the time. So during the daytime, you're staying on your feet. So fluid has a tendency to go with gravity towards your feet. But when you lay down at night, it's going to just be equal throughout your body, which is what we don't want because then it is going to be in your airways just a little bit, like you're not going to suffocate yourself. And then you have more fluid in here, more narrow airway, more likely to close. That's why sodium in sleep apnea is not very straightforward because when they look at the research, they find that there's really not a very big relationship between sodium status, sodium intake, and sleep apnea symptoms. They do find, though, that people with obstructive sleep apnea will have higher sodium excretion. Now, the reason for this is because of a hormone known as ADH. ADH is your antidiuretic hormone. It prevents you from peeing. So, for instance, if ADH is high, then you pee less. You retain water. If ADH is low, water goes out. So think about it like this. You're on a camping trip in the middle of the night. You want ADH to be high, unless you like peeing and seeing the stars and wondering if that's a bear or a raccoon over there. So think of that. ADH should go up at night so you don't have to pee so many times at night. Now, in sleep apnea, ADH is lower at night because of all the disruptions of sleep. That's why when we talk about sodium here, it's not so much across the day, like magnesium or potassium, having potassium like as part of your food or salt. It's at a targeted time. Because if we did salt all day, it may cause issues, may not, you know, but we want to be targeted. So that's why a lot of times they'll use sodium to increase ADH at night. And what that looks like is a pinch, like a small, like just take your fingers, whatever, to an eighth teaspoon of sea salt or even the potassium salt within 30 minutes of bedtime in a small amount of water, couple ounces. And I'll talk about the potion in just a little bit there. So that's the deal on sodium. Again, sea salt or the potassium salt, really super duper important there. Now for all together here, which is also a little bit of a summary, but we add a little bit more, is being able to just have it all together here. So this would require the things to be in powder form, all of them. And it would be basically everything we've discussed: the salt, the magnesium glycinate, potassium. Now, the big thing, low. You want to go low because every time you combine an electrolyte with water, it's going to, oh, I'll just say it creates more osmolarity, which effectively, as osmolarity goes up, I guess it's really osmolality. As that goes up, this concoction will have a propensity to draw fluid towards it. So if you go higher and higher on these things here, I'm gonna correct this here. All right, that should be like a pinch. Just do a pinch. Okay, I'm just gonna say it because my handwriting's awful with this thing. You want to trend towards the lower side of these because if you combine them all together at their like max dosages as based on the literature, then it's going to have a high osmolality. That means it's going to draw more fluid into your gut and cause significant discomfort. So that's why the smartest people, when they're doing things, always start low, start slow, and all of that. Now, another piece is to just add a little bit of lemon because that will actually enhance the absorption of some of these things and, nice little taste there. I mean, this probably won't taste very good at all. So about, I like 4 ounces is what I've done with this in the past. And having like the lowish amounts of these, a little bit of lemon, do that about like 30, 60 minutes before bedtime. And that's been able to be helpful for some people there. So that's just something else to consider. Again, I mean, I guess this is all optional. You can just watch this, nod your head, and do nothing. Correct. Or some people add in one or the other. Now, it can be hard picking what you want to do because you may be like this guy and feeling really low on your battery, which is why very times I notice a lot of people hesitate because they're like, oh, is this working for someone else? Because when you have low energy and you're trying to do something, you have to invest your energy to do it. And if you feel it's not going to pay off, that's something you want to do because then it just adds to the frustration. But if you have the right tools at the right time and have the simplest thing, so you have the most effective tools so you can actually get the results, makes life a lot easier. So that's what we have in the Peckus breathing program here. So go to ochnow.com/program or check out the link in the description to learn more about that. But thanks for watching. Dylan Peck is here, and I'll see you soon.